Hey, what's up? Tristan from Huge Menace here. Welcome to part 4 of the ND add-on deep dive series. In this video, we'll cover bevels. Bevels are used everywhere in hard surface modeling, yet they're typically one of the first things people get frustrated with when used destructively. This generally boils down to the fact that they're hard to edit or removed when applied destructively without tedious manual work or specialized add-ons. Using non-destructive bevels will naturally help you avoid this frustration. Still, they have their own quirks and limitations. Unfortunately, unless you're using CAD software with things that are defined mathematically, you'll need to find clever ways to achieve what you want in Blender, both destructively and non-destructively when using a lot of bevels. ND deals purely with non-destructive bevels and does its best to make them as intuitive and easy to use as possible. Let's get started. A quick note about bevels. They come in two primary forms, chamfers and fillets. Chamfers typically add a 45-degree angle to the edge of a feature, or rather, a single segment. A fillet, on the other hand, forms a rounded edge. Fillets have more than one segment, and each new segment increases the overall smoothness or resolution. In Blender, we can achieve both bevel types using a single modifier applied in both object and edit mode. So let's start with the first bevel variation, the traditional object-based bevel. Start by selecting the object you wish to affect, and then select the bevel operator from the Bevels submenu. You'll be presented with an overlay with many options, but don't let that overwhelm you. Most parameters have sensible defaults you won't need to touch, but they are available here for more advanced use cases. The first parameter, width, is the width of the new faces created by the modifier at each target edge. Increasing this value will create a chamfer. By default, clamp overlap is disabled, so increasing the width past the overlap threshold will cause your geometry to collapse and or self-intersect. To avoid this, you can hit the C key to toggle clamp overlap, limiting the bevel to its maximum achievable width. Next is the number of segments. Increasing the segment count will increase the number of faces generated at each target edge. Increasing this value past 1 creates a fillet. The set angle determines the target edges. This angle is set to 30 degrees, a reasonably common angle used in hard surface modeling for both bevels and sharp edges. It's easy to change the angle if necessary. The default angle can also be configured in the add-on preferences to one of the three most commonly used angles, 30, 45, or 60. Remember that this angle preference is used in more places than just the bevel operator, for instance, smooth shading and UV seams, which will be covered later in the series. Next, there's the bevel profile. This parameter defines the shape of the super ellipse used by the bevel operator when rebuilding the beveled sections. Depending on the value supplied, this will result in a convex or concave curve. 0.5 is the default and typically what you want to use for most cases. However, you can play with this value to get other intriguing results. After that, we have a couple more toggles. The first, harden normals, ensures that the normals of the newly generated faces match those of the adjacent faces. This results in cleaner shading on the more prominent faces present. Using hardened normals will also cause chamfers to appear smoothed over. This is a great way to fake a fillet while limiting the additional geometry created. However, it's best used on small bevels. Next on the list is enhanced wireframe. There's not much to say here other than it's a quick way to enable a wireframe overlay, which helps you visualize the resulting geometry as you tweak various parameters. Finally, loop slide. When enabled, loop slide causes the bevel modifier to prefer sliding along edges over even widths. It's an esoteric feature, so I won't go into more depth with an example, but suppose your bevels ever break down or generate undesirable or unexpected geometry, combining clamp overlap and loop slide may help solve the problem, so it's worth trying. Okay, let's chat about the bevel operator's alternative modes. The first, which is a standard mode across most of ND's operators, is activated by holding down the control key when selecting the bevel operator. This mode will remove the last bevel applied to the object. Now, I say last bevel because unlike most ND operators, the bevel operator can be stacked. Before I demonstrate this, start with the standard use case. If we apply a bevel to an object, confirm it, and then select it again, it'll go into recall mode. This is what you want most of the time. But in a situation where you want to apply a second, or third, or however many more bevels, you can use the stack alternative mode. This can be done by holding down the Shift key when selecting the bevel operator. When recalling bevels, if ND detects you have more than one bevel applied, an additional parameter will be present at the bottom of the overlay. This allows you to press the R key to cycle through the different object bevels applied and adjust their settings. Okay, let's move on. The next operator in the list is Vertex Bevel. This bevel is designed for vertices, so let's switch to edit mode. In this example, I'll use a single plane. Select the vertex or vertices you want to bevel and run the Vertex Bevel operator. The operator overlay mimics a subset of the options we saw in the object bevel operator. The width, number of segments, and profile all work identically. However, unlike the object bevel operator, you cannot stack vertex bevels. Selecting a vertex or set of vertices currently affected by a vertex bevel will recall the operator. Selecting a new vertex while selecting any other vertices affected by a previous bevel and rerunning the operation will recall the current bevel and add the new vertex into the group. This is a quick way to add a vertex you may have previously missed. To remove just a single or set of vertices from a vertex bevel, select them and, from the sketch menu, choose Clear Vertex Groups. Select any vertex and control-click on the vertex bevel operator when you wish to remove all vertex bevels. Now, there are some interesting properties to note regarding the vertex bevels, and these tie into its alternative modes. To help me demonstrate, I'll take a standard plane that's been solidified. Now let's jump into edit mode and select a single vertex. I'll run a stock standard vertex bevel and see what happens. Hopefully this isn't surprising. By default, ND will place vertex bevels at the top of the modify stack, which, given that Blender applies modifiers from top to bottom, results in the vertex bevel being used first, creating a chamfered corner, and then the resulting profile being solidified. However, if you were to apply a vertex bevel after the solidification, you get a very different result. You could do this manually in the modify stack, but let's use the shift alternative mode instead to do this automatically. This, unlike the previous result, is surprising. Allow me to explain what's happened. When a modifier such as solidify is applied to our plane, the vertices and edges are copied and carried to their new resting positions. While in edit mode, we can only select one vertex in this particular corner, but it accounts for two virtual or copied vertices. Hence, when the vertex bevel is applied later in the stack, with this vertex as its reference, it chamfers the two corners instead. Regarding edges, the vertex bevel operator offers one more alternative mode, but to truly appreciate what it delivers, let's first examine the edge bevel operator and then return to it. So, we'll start with a cube for this next bevel operator, as it has multiple edges we can target. Jump into edit mode, and then select an edge or set of edges and run the edge bevel operator. The overlay and its options are nearly identical to the object bevel, so I'll skip over the options I explained earlier. There are a few key differences. First, we don't have an angle option, as we manually select the target edges. Second, we have a new parameter called weight. An edge bevel works by applying a single bevel operation to this object's modifier stack. The width applied to each edge is controlled by its weight, representing a factor of the width value applied. That means we get put into recall mode if we apply this current operation and select a new edge. With the new edge selected, we can adjust all of the edge bevel's options again. Still, more importantly, by changing the weight, we can control how much of this new edge is affected. Unfortunately, this means you cannot individually control the number of segments for each edge. This isn't a limitation of ND, but of how Blender's bevel modifier works with edges. However, given Blender's use of attributes, I've seen some compelling work in this area which suggests that this limitation may be removed at some point. For now, though, you'll need to work around it if you want to conduct multiple edge bevels with different segment counts in a non-destructive way. This is a perfect segue back to our previous operator, Vertex Bevel. Remember that other alternative mode I was going to talk about? Well, let's examine how this helps solve this problem. From here, let's select two vertices that share a common edge. Then, select the Vertex Bevel operator while holding down the Alt key. This alternative mode creates a new edge bevel. However, instead of using edge weights, it uses a vertex group. Given this newfound power, we can create numerous unique edge bevels with varying widths, segment counts, and profiles. But with great power comes great responsibility, or rather, limitation. Selecting vertices crossing over multiple vertex groups will cause an error due to a constraint enforced by ND to support vertex bevel recall mode. This can be bypassed, however, by manually creating the necessary modifiers in the modifier stack. Be warned, ND won't be able to recall those vertex bevels after that. You can, however, create an edge bevel that crosses those vertices. You may need to manually shift its position in the modifier stack to achieve a desirable result. Still, using the Vertex Bevel's alt mode is a great way to achieve non-destructive edge bevels where different widths, segments, and/or profiles are needed. Not to mention, it's a cool party trick. Well, that's all there is to know about bevels in ND. In the following video, we'll cover extrusion. I'll see you there.